So Luang started commenting on the recording gadgets, that these are machines to gather data. What we are doing is now practicing Suttamaya Panya, like practicing to develop wisdom from what we have heard. In order to develop Chintanamaya Panya, the wisdom that comes from the mind, we need to gather data first for that. And usually it was done like with remembering these things, but these days we've got these gadgets to help us. So today we have all come together to follow the allowance of the Buddha to do our duty on a full moon day. The day when the moon is full, has its full radiance, and is every fortnight coming to perfection, is the day when the Buddha allowed us to recollect how we behave, how we are acting in body, speech and mind, and how we are controlling our minds. And we do this gathering on the full moon day together in the Sima, which is the boundary territory. The Sima where we do the Sangha Kama, the transactions of the Sangha, which are the root and the basis for stability. And in this Sima, this territory, there are different types of Sima. There are, for example, the Sapantara Sima, which is also called Forest Sima, which is a Sima following a certain distance around us, can be determined like that. And then there's the Hatha Sima, which is the Sima which has to be formally inaugurated and formally established. And then there's the Gama Sima, like the Sima which comprises villages and towns. And the Sima is a territory where we remember our duties as a Sangha and the principles of being together, and we check our behavior and about our conduct, and each one personally checks his conduct and confesses where he has transgressed the guidelines that the Buddha laid down for good behavior, and where he has shown disrespect to the training rules or has gone beyond the training rules. Then the other person acknowledges and says, it is well, Venerable Sir. And then we start the recitation of the training rules. We remember that these offenses that are expressed in the training rules are all reasons for obstructions, for the goodness, and for the impurities, and the things that defile us. They're the basis for stained behavior, and stains in our behavior in body, speech and mind, and they express themselves through the body and the speech, and they are in relation to what happens in the mind. It's the interconnection of nama and rupa. If there was only the mind, these actions wouldn't come to expression. There wouldn't be much problem, but we express them through bodily actions and verbal actions. There are bases or reasons, samutthana, the reasons for the offenses. The first one is not knowing what should be done, what is right or wrong. The second one is knowing but continuing to do what one wants, knowing that it is an offense but still continuing, or not knowing that something is an offense and not doing it. And then the third one is doubt. The fourth one is lack of mindfulness. And the last one, which is the most dangerous, is lack of shame and fear of wrongdoing. This is the most dangerous. It is comparable to a tree that is in the forest, which doesn't have any leaves, like a dead tree in the forest, and the tree is not able to protect and shelter any others. The sense of shame refers to the guidelines of what the samanas should do. Samanas are the ones that are supposed to see the danger in samsara, in the round of rebirth. Seeing the danger of the things that prevent us from being free and prevent us from being our own refuge. For seeing these things we need knowledge, we need understanding, we need mindfulness. Mindfulness is like a light that shines into darkness for us to see. So, as a Sangha, we do the duty of seeing the danger in the round of rebirth and trying to develop a change of direction, coming from the average worldly being who lives in a basic natural state which hasn't been developed and there hasn't been any kind of selection of activities, and changing into the status or the gender of being a samana who has got ideals about life, and he's got standards about his life, and he's got the aim of trying to become beyond dukkha. We do these duties by checking our external behavior and our internal attitudes. If these are in balance, we don't need to deviate from these ideals when we meet society. Society is full of worldly impingements and full of worldly mind states, an expression of worldly mind states. So we practice restraint, sangvara, called the sila sangvara, when it refers to the 227 precepts. This means that we're not doing our actions according to our moods and not behaving in the undeveloped way, like an average worldly person that just does everything according to his likes and dislikes, and believing all these things that he does belong to him or are capable of gratifying him. His own moods and mind states, a putuchana, an average unenlightened being, takes as a self. He takes them as essential. And the body as well, the putuchana takes as a self, takes as essential. But we cannot deny the body its course, its natural course. We cannot forbid it. We cannot manipulate it to do what we want it to do. And this is part of our duties, to see the rupa kanda sankharas are things that we need to refer to without attachment. We need to have a feeling of purity and unstained relation towards it, not taking the body as a self. Sangvara, restraint, is one of the beautifications and embellishments of the Arya Pukkalas or the Samanas. The Sila Sangvara is about bodily verbal conduct. And here we need filtering. We need a kind of distillation to distill and filter and select our mind states. They can either be low, unworthy, or disadvantageous, or they can be wholesome and beneficial. Just to follow the things that one likes or dislikes or feels are agreeable or disagreeable are the marks of an undeveloped person. And they lead to disadvantages or even dangers. So that's why we filter and we adapt and change, develop things. We support the noble, the things that the Buddha praised. This is called developing. The human potential, the potential we have to develop, the Buddha said, is the highest gain, is a very high gain, manusso kiccho patilapo. Because the human potential is the potential for the beneficial. In another saying, the Buddha said, Kiccang tamano savanang. To do the duty of hearing the Dhamma is very beneficial, because the Dhamma is leading to peace. It leads to experience of the ones that have developed themselves. It's the transmission of experiences of the ones that have seen peace and freedom from dangers. So when we hear this, we take the chance to rely on their advice and their recommendation. There's another saying, Kiccang samajivitang, to lead one's life in a perfect way is a duty. And there's different aspects to how to lead our lives as a samana. The phrases that we know, patibatti, for example, to practice well, means that we are enhancing the plus side of life and we are dismissing the minus, the negative, the dangerous side. We dismiss it by thinking in our minds that these things are unimportant, they're dangerous temptations, they're like trash, they're unuseful, and we just leave them behind. We don't care about them and we don't enhance them, we don't support them. To practice well, patibatti, means to know the benefits and the disadvantages. And this means to have mindfulness. Mindfulness is about seeing the plus and minus, the benefits and the disadvantages, or the profits and the dangers. This is also represented in how the world expresses these standards, called lokavacca. What is disadvantageous should be abandoned, and the wholesome should be developed. This is a teaching that the Buddha gave. And we develop the wholesome through developing the kusala citta, the mind that is connected to the wholesome. And if we do this, we'll find that we live in a warm, friendly and supportive society, supportive of peace, where there's no jealousy or hatred, and where one can see the world as just nature, where people have friendliness and warmth of heart, and they see each other as relatives. So to practice good, practice well, means to give importance to good behavior. Then there's ujjupatipanno, that means to practice straight. And that means straightforward towards the things that give rise to peace, that are for the sake of peace and for the sake of non-agitation. So we go against the stream, we go against the current of the world. We try to see the world as something that is empty of likes and dislikes, empty of favorable things and disfavorable things, agreeable things and disagreeable things. We see the agreeable things as poisons that are covered with honey, sugar-coated poisons of our likes. We go straight on, we practice straight on forwards towards a release from these desires. The desires, things that we like, they are staining our heart. We're trying to relieve upadana, the attachment to these things, the attachment of I, my, me and mine, thinking that things belong to us. We go against the stream, seeing the body as something unsupportive, not beneficial, not beautiful, disgusting. The body is actually not agreeable. The body has to dissolve, it has to part from us. It is disadvantageous, it is something that is not supportive and not lasting. And we understand that it doesn't belong to us. We get detached from the body and we experience a relief from what is called attavadupatana, the grasping on to the sense of self. There's an example for this. To relieve the attavadupatana, it's just like living together as a sangha. A sangha is an impersonal thing. It's an impersonal thing that does not follow the individual mind states and the individual desires. It's a communal thing. It's an impersonal faculty. When we see this detachment from pradhana, we are not in a mind state that is connected to the world and to the mind states of the world. We are detached from them, and ekaggata citta arises, a one-pointedness of mind. And this is a state of mind or experience where we are not entangled or related to the world. We're detached from the world. So we experience the view of an Arya, of a noble one. The practice of ujjupatipanno is actually about us being ones that are in training, about being sekha ukkalas, like people that are still in training. We are training to relieve our mind states, which are still entangled in the world, from attachment. We're coming from a point and going to another point. We're practicing, we're training ourselves. We're coming from the world, which is full of desires, and we're going towards a relief from desires. This relies on jnana patipanno. This is the practice with insight, where we see dangers, the dangers of samsara and the low points that arise out of lopa, dosa and moha, greed, hatred and delusion. To see that these three defilements, lopa, dosa, moha, are ignoble and low mind states. They are fitting for householders, but not for one's practice, and they should be abandoned. We are practicing for the abandonment of samsara. We are practicing for the abandonment of the round of rebirth, and we try to see the danger in lopa, dosa, moha. We see these defilements of greed, hatred and delusion just like excrement, or things that we are cast away. And then we become a member of the lineage of the noble ones, the Arya Vamsa. We are following the traces and the tracks of the ones that have developed peace. Samicipatipano, another aspect of the practice, means to practice appropriately and to abandon dukkha appropriately. These are all practices doing our duties in abandoning defilements. In fact, these are duties of a human beings. They are duties that refer to what we call ourself. And now that we have gathered together in the Patimokkha, we recall and recollect how we are doing these duties, and we recollect our behavior in body, speech and mind. The mind is the one who knows and the one who is awake. And being the one who knows and being the one who is awake leads to perfection, to liberation, just like a lotus that comes from the mud and is free from the mud, is beyond the mud, or a tree that has grown and spreads its branches. So to practice these duties and to practice to develop oneself means an opportunity. To practice means the opportunity to develop. Since we have been born, we should not seek the fetters or stimulation or intoxications. We should do our duties in being a leader of society, being an example for society, being somebody who has relieved the sense of self and giving the others a chance to see how human beings can take their chance, being a light for society and showing others what beautiful behavior is like. So when we practice and we put forth effort, it is an effort that goes against selfishness and feelings that are egotistical, self-centered. We practice not to be selfish and think about our own happiness and likes and dislikes. So in this we need what the Buddha called khanti, or in Thai otton. That means to go against the grain, go against the stream. Khanti is translated as patient endurance, and it is a potential of power which we build up in our practice. It is a potential where we need to gradually retain things and keep them back, just like we keep fluids retained in a vessel so that they don't kind of flow in all directions and disintegrate or disappear. So this is like just like our behavior, it just goes in all directions, it flows into the directions of the world. But if we have khanti and we got the facility to retain it and to keep it back, to keep our feelings back, then we're able to make a dam which doesn't let our feelings flow out and follow the worldly streams. And it's actually a play of word, like sakat means to distill and gan means to ward off. So we're distilling, we're filtering, we're retaining, we're processing our feelings. Then we have something that hinders them to go out and not to disintegrate. The way we relate to our experiences and our feelings that are outgoing is like we're relating to something dangerous, for example as fire. When we relate to our feelings, the dangerous feelings that we have, feelings of being hurt or being disappointed, So we need to be careful and cautious that the mind doesn't develop into this direction. And we have to have a sense of responsibility. Whenever we use the sense faculties, the eye, the ear, the nose, then we need to be able to handle them responsibly, because they give rise to mind states of likings and dislikings, and these are just moods of the mind that go into all directions. So we need to have mindfulness and patience, endurance when we deal with these mind states. And we have to see them and we have to understand them. This is like we relate to dangerous things. We need special mindfulness and care when we relate to things that can be of danger for us. And then with patience, endurance, we get a firmness and stability and a solidity which is able to face these dangerous processes. And one can say we build up immunity or a sense of resistance, like from in a medical sense. And then there's no danger with these impingements to us. This is because we have khanti. And when we have khanti and patience, endurance, this enables us to see the path and the direction which we are going in. So the Buddha said practice is not about closing our eyes, or the practice of khanti is not just kind of shutting off oneself, but it means to relate to the experiences of the outer world with sati and panya, with mindfulness and wisdom. There's the outer world and there's the inner world. And outwards, like the outer appearance of the environment, this may cause a lot to us and may affect us quite a lot. For example, like things, external things, they may affect our practice and the way we want to put forth effort. And there are a lot of dangers coming from the outer conditions, in that sense that they may cause us to build up tricks and deceits and excuses about what we want to do in our practice, saying it's too hot, it's too cold, or it's raining, or like these are all excuses. They're stimulated by outer conditions, and the mind is weak, doesn't have patience, endurance to endure hot, cold, and then we say we can't practice, and we don't put forth effort. But effort, the Buddha said, needs to be put forth day and night. Just with patience, this is possible. So dukkha and sukha arise constantly, and when these arise, we have to relate to them with panya, with mindfulness and wisdom. And the Buddha pointed especially at dukkha in the first sermon that he gave, where he talked about the noble truths, the Arya Satya. The Buddha said that the noble truths are things that we need to focus on and know, and these are things that we have to understand through looking at and to deal with responsibly. If we don't practice correctly, this thing that is called dukkha becomes a danger. Why is it called suffering? Why is it called dukkha? This is just because we don't relate to it correctly and we don't use the right method of facing it. So if we focus on dukkha with knowing, we understand, for example, the external conditions of our life, of birth, old age, death. And in fact we understand this is just nature and these things have to come. As soon as we're born, we sign the treaties of having to die. There's a stability and firmness of mind in realizing that anything that arises has to cease. For example, dukkha that comes up has to cease again. For example, if we face dukkha with knowledge and understanding and with patient endurance, it is just like the body being exposed to the heat of the sun and breaking out in sweat, which is unpleasant, but the body has a reaction to the sun, produces sweat, and the sweat cools it down. And in the end, if we know this process, like we're exposed to the sun and we develop sweat, cools us down a bit, but in fact it's hot and this is the process of nature, we know that this is normal. We get to know what is normal. And if we know what is normal for life, we don't have to be worried about it, and we don't have to fear it, and we don't have to be afraid of dukkha. We just focus our minds on it, and we know it and we understand it. It is like we have mindfulness while we walk in the dark. If we have mindfulness in the dark, then we shine a light on the darkness. We can walk even though it is dark. The dukkha in the Noble Truths is about the reality of life. And this is something that happens to us everywhere, in every posture. It's just like the Buddha recommended, to know every posture that we're taking. Sitting, standing, walking, lying down. We have to have mindfulness of that. So all this practice of khanti, patience, endurance, and mindfulness, and focusing on dukkha and understanding is about not being heedless and not to show weaknesses of oneself. For example, weaknesses come up when we develop desire towards food. And it's the example that we really want to have food, a certain kind of food, and we're completely obsessed with it. We become irritable and confused if we don't have patience. So we have to be able to retain our emotions in that sense, that we can face desires that are stimulating and impinging on us. And to know that these desires, they'll never be fulfilled and they'll never be satisfied. They're an endless process of being not full. And this is expressed by the famous saying of the Buddha, Nati tanha nadi. There's no river like craving. Craving is just continuously flowing. The desires, they're like these little worms, I think they're called bait, that you put onto a fish to eat, and then they swallow the hook. And to understand this, we have to see what dukkha is like, and we have to see what desires are like, and we have to see dukkha is like this. We see it without desire for it to be otherwise. We see just dukkha is like that, and this is called tathata, the suchness of that. It couldn't be any other. So reflecting on these processes, we see it is like an ocean, and an ocean naturally has waves. An ocean is not a clear plain surface. There are always ripples, waves, and ups and downs on it. And so this is the simile for having patience, endurance towards dukkha, understanding it, and developing the supreme faculty to burn up kilesas, as the Buddha said, khanti paramang tapotitika. To practice patience, endurance is the utmost practice, or the utmost practice of a recluse. Of course, feel hunger is a torture. If we are really hungry, then and dissatisfied with something, then everything is an enemy to us. But in our life, we have to keep on fighting these enemies, and we have to understand what these enemies are. And the enemy is in fact the feelings that hinder our understanding. So this is why the Kruba Ajahns have praised Otton, patience, endurance, khanti. They remind us that it takes time, a lot of time, to adapt and change one's habits.